There are moments in life that mark us forever, whispers of destiny that change our path when we least expect it. The story I'm going to tell you today could be that of your neighbor, your grandmother, or even your own. Are you ready to hear this story? My own son pushed me off a cliff. My husband whispered, "Don't move, Margaret, pretend you're dead." As I lay there, my body broken on the sharp rocks, blood trickling down my face and pain shooting through me like knives, William's words echoed in my head. Pretend to be dead to survive a murder attempt by my own son. But the worst part wasn't the 100-foot fall, not even the unbearable pain of my broken bones. The worst was hearing Nathan, the son I had lovingly raised for 40 years, celebrating our supposed deaths with his wife Rachel. "It worked! We finally did it," he said to her as I struggled to control my breathing, to not move, to not scream from pain and betrayal. How did we get here? At what point did my son turn into a monster capable of murdering his own parents? The answer lay buried in a secret from 20 years ago. A secret so dark it had remained entombed beneath years of lies, fake smiles, and empty embraces. I never imagined that at 68 years old, I would be playing dead to escape from the son I gave life to. For 4 decades, I had built what I believed was a perfect family. Our mornings in our colonial home in the Massachusetts countryside began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of birds in the apple orchard outside. I taught English literature at the local high school, while William ran our antique restoration business that had been in his family for generations. We had 2 wonderful children, Emily, our firstborn, brilliant and compassionate, and Nathan, 3 years younger, always reserved and calculating. On Sundays, we would all gather around the oak table that William had restored with his own hands. Emily would talk excitedly about her plans to study medicine at Johns Hopkins, while Nathan listened in silence, with an indecipherable expression in his eyes. In the evenings, William and I would walk among the century-old apple trees, planning our retirement, dreaming of the trips we would take when the children followed their own paths. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. Everything changed. One October night, exactly 20 years ago, Emily didn't come home after going out with friends to a harvest festival in town. We waited up until dawn, frantically calling everyone we knew. Nathan stayed in his room saying he was tired and that his sister was probably fine, but there was something strange about his behavior that I couldn't decipher at the time. William went out with neighbors to search for her. At daybreak, they found her body at the bottom of a ravine near Widow's Peak, where young people often gathered to watch the stars. The police concluded it was an accident. She had probably slipped in the darkness after having a few drinks with her friends. I never questioned that version. How could I have imagined the truth? The funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore the same black dress I had worn to my mother's burial. Nathan remained strangely calm while I collapsed in tears. William held me tightly when my legs gave way in front of my daughter's coffin. Now I understand why he seemed to carry an even greater weight than the loss of our daughter. He knew something I didn't, something that would change our lives forever. After Emily's death, Nathan changed completely. He became more attentive and caring, helping with household chores and spending more time with us. I interpreted it as his way of dealing with grief, of filling the void left by his sister. What a cruel mistake that was. The years passed. Nathan married Rachel, a woman from Boston he met in college. They had 2 beautiful children, Ethan and Olivia, who became the center of our lives. I finally felt that life was giving us a second chance. Rachel called me Mom, and Nathan had followed in his father's footsteps, expanding the family business with a modern restoration workshop, specializing in high-end antique furniture. Our family finally seemed rebuilt. Everything appeared perfect again, but now, lying at the bottom of this ravine, with broken ribs and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, I understood that all that happiness was a carefully orchestrated lie by the son I thought I knew. The first signs that something was wrong began a few months ago, when William and I decided to update our will. Between our country home the antique business, and our savings, we had a considerable estate to leave as inheritance. It was Nathan who suggested we visit the attorney. Mom, Dad, you're both over 65 now. It's important to have everything organized, he said, with that smile that now seems sinister to me. Rachel was at his side, squeezing my hand with fingers that would later push me toward death. We love you too much, and just want to make sure you're protected, she added in her sweet voice. The attorney, Mr. Reynolds, a man we had known for decades, explained our options. We could create a trust, divide the inheritance between our grandchildren, or make a traditional will. Nathan insisted that Rachel and he be named as our sole heirs. We'll make sure everything is distributed fairly for the children, he argued. Besides, you're going to need us as you get older. It's better if we have access to the resources to care for you properly. Something in his tone bothered me, but William seemed convinced. My husband, who had always been more trusting than me, accepted the proposal without much resistance. I had my doubts, especially because I remembered how Emily had always talked about helping us financially in our old age. But Emily was gone and Nathan was our only living child. We signed the documents on a Tuesday afternoon. Rachel wore an elegant suit and hugged me for a long time after the signing. Now we're officially a family united forever, she whispered in my ear. Her words caused an inexplicable chill to run down my spine. That night, as I prepared dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. There was something in Nathan's gaze, a spark of triumph, that reminded me of when he was a child and got away with some mischief. But this wasn't childish mischief, it was something much darker and more dangerous. The following weeks were strange. Nathan and Rachel began to visit us more frequently, but their visits had a different tone. They didn't come just to spend time with us, they always brought suggestions about how we should improve the property, what investments to make, or what life insurance policies to take out. Mom, you should think about selling part of the land, Nathan said as he surveyed the orchard with calculating eyes. We could invest that money and get better returns. But I loved our property. Every tree, every stone held a precious memory of our 45 years together. The kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals, the yard where our children and grandchildren had played. I couldn't imagine selling even a square foot of our land. When I expressed this, I saw a flash of irritation in Nathan's eyes that chilled me to the bone. Mom is being irrational, he told William in a tone he had never used with me before. This property is too big for two people your age. If you fall or something happens, we won't be able to get here in time to help. Rachel nodded enthusiastically. Plus, the maintenance must cost a fortune. It would be much smarter to sell now while the real estate market is booming. William began to consider their arguments, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else behind that pressure. One night, after another of those tense conversations, I asked William if he didn't think it strange that Nathan was suddenly so interested in our financial affairs. Margaret, he just cares about us, he replied, as he put on his pajamas. Maybe we should consider his suggestions. We're not as young as we used to be. But I saw something in his eyes, a shadow of doubt that he didn't want to acknowledge. Now I know that William already had his suspicions, that he was already beginning to connect dots that I didn't even know existed. Things got worse when Nathan suggested we give him power of attorney over our finances. It's just a precaution, he explained, while Rachel prepared tea in our kitchen as if she already owned the place. If one of you gets sick or has a health problem, we can handle your affairs without legal complications. The way he said it, so naturally, almost convinced me. But there was something about his insistence that made me nervous. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to William's breathing beside me, trying to understand why I felt so uneasy. The next day I decided to call my sister Charlotte to ask for advice. Charlotte had always been more perceptive than me, more suspicious of people's intentions. When I told her about Nathan's pressure, she remained silent for a long moment. Margaret, she finally said, don't you find it strange that Nathan is so eager to control your money? I mean, he has his own business. He's financially stable. Why would he need so much control over your finances? Her words hit me like a slap. She was right. Nathan had never shown financial problems, never borrowed money, never given signs of needing our financial help. So why this sudden interest in our estate? That afternoon, when Nathan appeared for another of his conversations about our future, I decided to confront him directly. Son, I began as we sat on the porch. Why is it so important for you to have control over our financial affairs? Your father and I are still lucid. His reaction was immediate and revealing. His face hardened, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of someone else, something cold and calculating that I had never noticed before. Mom, this isn't about control, he responded, with a tense voice. This is about love and family responsibility. But the way he pronounced family responsibility sounded more like a threat than an expression of affection. Rachel, who had remained silent until then, intervened with her calm but firm voice. Margaret, we only want what's best for you. It's painful to see you worry about things we could easily resolve. That night, after they left, William and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where none existed. I insisted that something wasn't right, that our son's behavior had changed too much. William, I said, as we washed the dishes, do you remember what Nathan was like before Emily died? He was different, more, I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about him that frightened me. My husband stopped drying the plate he had in his hands and looked at me intently. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Recognition and fear. Margaret, he said in a very low voice, there are things about Emily's death that I never told you. My heart began to beat so hard, I thought it would leap out of my chest. William's words hit me like lightning. What about Emily's death? I asked with a trembling voice. William sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals as a family, where Emily used to do her homework and where Nathan always remained silent. He ran his hands over his face, as if trying to erase memories that had tormented him for 20 years. The night Emily died, he began with a choked voice. Nathan wasn't in his room like he told us. I saw him leave the house around 10 o'clock. I followed him because something in his attitude worried me. He had been very strange those days, more aggressive, more resentful. My husband paused, looking at his hands as if the terrible truth he had kept for so long was written on them. I saw them arguing near Widow's Peak. Margaret, I heard them shouting horrible things at each other. My world began to spin. What were they arguing about? I whispered, though part of me no longer wanted to know the answer. William looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. Tears he hadn't even shed at our daughter's funeral. About money, Margaret. Nathan was furious because Emily was the eldest, because according to the traditions in my family, she would inherit most of our property. But there was something else, something about money that Emily had discovered. What money? I asked, feeling the floor disappear beneath my feet. William sighed deeply before continuing. Days before she died, Emily came to talk to me in the workshop. She had discovered that Nathan was stealing money from our savings. Small amounts at first, but then larger sums. Emily had evidence. She had been investigating for months. My mind refused to process what I was hearing. My son, whom I had raised with so much love and values, had been stealing from us since before his sister died. Why did you never tell me? I reproached William, feeling that the betrayal was multiplying. Because when I reached Widow's Peak that night, it was already too late, he responded with a suffocated voice. I saw Nathan standing next to Emily's body. Our son was shaking, crying, and repeating over and over, "It was an accident. It was an accident." He looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me to help him. Dad, he said. Emily slipped when she tried to grab me. I was just defending myself, and she lost her balance. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. But you believed him? I murmured, though I already knew the answer. William nodded slowly, with an expression of guilt that had tormented him for decades. He was my son, Margaret. My son was asking for my help, and Emily was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it really was an accident, that Nathan had learned his lesson, that he would become a better person after this. And the stolen money? I asked, needing to know every detail of this nightmare. I never mentioned that I knew, he replied. In fact, he continued taking small amounts that I pretended not to notice. Because confronting him would mean admitting that I covered up a homicide. I became his accomplice, Margaret. Every time I remained silent, every time I pretended not to see the bank accounts diminish, I became more of an accomplice. The terrible reality began to take shape in my mind. Each piece of the puzzle, fitting perfectly to reveal a monstrous image. That's why he's so interested in controlling our finances now, I murmured. It's not because he cares about us, it's because he wants to finish what he started 20 years ago. William nodded gravely. And there's something else, Margaret. Something I discovered a couple of weeks ago. What more could there be? I asked, feeling that my heart couldn't bear more revelations. William went to his office and took some papers he had hidden under other documents. I've been discreetly investigating the finances of the business. Things aren't going as well as Nathan wants us to believe. In fact, he's on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes more than $250,000 to various banks and suppliers. The papers trembled in my hands as I read the numbers. Nathan wasn't the successful businessman he pretended to be. He was a desperate person who had been living on lies and stolen money for decades. Does Rachel know about all this? I asked, remembering her calm smile and warm hugs. I'm sure she does, William replied. I've noticed how she directs the conversations when they talk about our money, how she asks specific questions about our savings, the value of the property, our insurance policies. These aren't innocent questions, Margaret. They're the questions of someone who is calculating exactly how much our deaths are worth. That phrase chilled me to the bone. Our deaths, I repeated in a whisper. It was the first time I considered that Nathan might want to physically harm us. Until that moment, I thought he just wanted to steal from us, or deceive us. But if he had caused the death of his own sister for money, what would stop him from killing his parents for the same reason? William? I said, gripping his hands. We have to go to the police. We have to tell them the truth about Emily and about what's happening now. But my husband shook his head with a look of helplessness that broke my heart. With what evidence, Margaret? I'm an accomplice in covering up a homicide. If I speak now, I'll go to jail too. And besides, who's gonna believe a 70-year-old man who kept this secret for 20 years? He was right. We were trapped in a web of lies and secrets that we had allowed to grow for too long. So, we just wait for him to kill us like he did with Emily? I asked, feeling desperation wash over me. We're going to be very careful, William said, trying to sound more confident than he really was. We're going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence. But his words were interrupted by the sound of the phone. It was Nathan. Hi, Mom, he said with that sweet voice that now sounded sinister to me. Rachel and I were thinking, and we believe it would be wonderful to celebrate your 45th wedding anniversary with something special. How about if we take you to that lookout in the White Mountains next weekend? We could go hiking as a family, take pictures, and spend a perfect day together. My blood froze. I looked at William, who had heard the conversation, and had the same look of terror on his face. It's a very sweet idea, son, I managed to respond with a trembling voice. But let us think about it, and we'll call you back tomorrow. After hanging up, William and I looked at each other in silence, knowing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. The lookout, I murmured. He's going to take us to the lookout to kill us and make it look like an accident. William nodded gravely. Just like he did with Emily. That night, we didn't sleep a minute. Embraced in our bed, planning how we could save ourselves from our own son, the boy I had raised with so much love and who now was coldly planning our murders. The following days were a nightmare of terror and dissembling. William and I had to act as if nothing had happened when Nathan and Rachel came to visit us, smiling when they talked about the trip to the lookout, nodding when they excitedly told us about plans to spend time with us, but inside, every fiber of my being screamed in fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of my daughter's killers, and they now plan to do the same to us. Rachel arrived Thursday afternoon with a new backpack, and that calm smile that now seemed like a sociopath's mask. "Margaret dear," she said, embracing me with those arms that would soon push me to my death. "I bought some supplies for our adventure at the lookout. Water, fruits, sandwiches, everything we'll need for the picnic." She showed me the contents of the backpack as if she were an excited child, but I could only think about how each of those items could be used to cover up our murder. "I also brought my new camera," she added, showing off an expensive digital camera. "I want to capture every moment of this special day. There'll be photos we'll keep forever." The irony of her words made me nauseous. The only photo she would take would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some ravine, if anyone found us. Nathan appeared carrying hiking equipment that looked brand new. "Dad," he told William with feigned enthusiasm, "I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike. Ropes, flashlights, first aid kit." Every word that came out of his mouth sounded like a cruel mockery. Safety equipment to plan our murders. The perversity of the situation made me dizzy. "Isn't it a bit dangerous for people our age?" I asked, trying to sound casual while looking for any excuse to cancel the trip. Nathan caressed my cheek with that false tenderness that turned my stomach. "That's why we chose a very easy and safe trail," he assured. "It's a route that even children can do. Besides, Rachel and I will be there to take care of you at all times." Yes, they would be there to take care of us until the exact moment they decided to push us off a cliff. That night, when they finally left, William and I sat on our porch trembling, not just from the chill of the night, but from the absolute terror we had contained for hours. "We can't go," I said, gripping his hands. "Let's make up some excuse." "If we don't go," William responded with a grave voice, "they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something that seems even more accidental, like a house fire or a robbery gone wrong. At least at the lookout, we know what they're going to try to do." His words had a terrible logic, but they didn't comfort me in the slightest. "Then, what do you suggest?" I asked, desperate to find some solution that would save our lives. William remained thoughtful for a few minutes before responding. "We're going to go, but we'll be prepared. I'm going to hide my phone and set it to record everything that happens. If we manage to survive, we'll have evidence. And if not," his voice broke, "at least someone will know the truth." Friday night, we could barely touch our dinner. We knew it could be our last meal together in our home. In that kitchen, where we had shared so many happy moments when we were a real family. William reviewed his will once more, making sure that if something happened to us, at least Nathan wouldn't get everything without there being some record of our suspicions. "I wrote a letter," he confessed, showing me a sealed envelope. "It's addressed to your sister Charlotte. In it I explain everything we know about Emily's death, and what we believe Nathan is planning to do to us. I hid it in the bank's safety deposit box. If we don't return from this trip, at least she'll know where to look for the truth." That night we went to bed embracing each other, whispering words of love that could be our last. "If something happens to me," William said, "I want you to know that these 45 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite everything, despite the mistakes and secrets, I love you more than my own life." I cried silently, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body, the smell of his skin. If I was going to die, I wanted to take those memories with me. Saturday dawned with a blue sky that seemed to mock our situation. Nathan arrived early, whistling a cheerful melody that chilled my blood. "Good morning, lovebirds," he shouted from the front door. "Ready for your big adventure?" Rachel appeared behind him, radiant, as if it were the happiest day of her life. Except that this would be an encounter with death. During breakfast, which we could barely eat, Nathan explained in detail the route we would take. "It's a beautiful trail," he said, spreading a map on the table. "It leads to a lookout where you can see the entire valley. They say the view is spectacular." His eyes gleamed with an enthusiasm that seemed demonic. Of course, the views would be spectacular. They would be the last we would see in our lives. "The trail has some steep parts," Rachel added, as if she were giving us useful tourist information. but nothing that experienced hikers like you can't handle. Her comment about our supposed hiking abilities sounded like a cruel joke. We were two septuagenarians who barely walked through the orchard from time to time. While we loaded the car, I saw Nathan meticulously checking his backpack, making sure he had everything he needed for his plan. I saw ropes, a small shovel, and something that looked like a flare. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing to the flare. "For safety," he responded without hesitation. "If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal." Of course, they would send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff, so our bodies could be found, and it would be confirmed that it was a tragic accident during a family hike. Everything calculated. Every detail had been planned to make our murders appear perfectly accidental. The car journey to the White Mountains lasted almost an hour that seemed like an eternity. Rachel put on upbeat music and sang along with the songs, as if we were really going on a fun family outing. Nathan drove carefully, obeying all speed limits, stopping at every stop sign. He didn't want to risk an accident that would ruin his perfect plans. During the journey, William discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. Everything that happened from that moment on would be recorded. If we managed to survive, we would have evidence. If not, at least the truth wouldn't die with us. When we finally reached the start of the trail, my heart was beating so hard I thought it would leap out of my chest. The place was beautiful, with tall pines and the sound of a stream in the distance. But for me, it had become the setting for my own execution. Nathan and Rachel took their backpacks from the car, smiling and joking as if it were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure?" Nathan asked, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw the same cold gleam in his eyes that he must have had the night Emily died. The trail began relatively easily, winding among ancient pines and moss-covered rocks. Rachel walked ahead of us, constantly taking photos and commenting on the beauty of the landscape. "Look at those wild flowers," she exclaimed, pointing to bushes full of purple flowers. "And that rock formation, incredible." Her performance was perfect, that of a loving daughter-in-law, enjoying a special day with her in-laws. Nathan walked behind us, supposedly to make sure we didn't fall behind, but I could feel his eyes on our backs like daggers. Every time I turned around to look at him, he smiled at me with that smile he had perfected over 20 years of lies. "How are you doing, Mom, Dad? Do you need to stop and rest?" he asked with false concern. After an hour of hiking, we began to climb a steeper part of the trail. My legs were already heavy, and William was breathing with difficulty. We weren't used to this type of exercise, and our murderous children knew it perfectly. They had chosen a route that would physically exhaust us, making us vulnerable for when the moment came to execute their plan. "We're almost at the lookout," Rachel announced enthusiastically. Although according to the map I had seen at home, we still had at least half an hour more of hiking. Her lie confirmed that they had no intention of reaching the official lookout. The place where they planned to kill us must be much closer. Throughout the hike, I tried to memorize every detail of the trail, every tree, every rock that could serve as a reference if I managed to survive, and needed to explain to the police exactly where everything had happened. William was doing the same, and occasionally we exchanged glances loaded with terror and determination. We knew we were walking toward our deaths, but we also knew it was our only chance to get the evidence we needed. "Look at that," Nathan suddenly shouted, pointing to a rock formation that stood out to our right. "That cliff has an incredible view. Let's climb up there to take some special photos." My blood froze. There was the place they had chosen for our murder. The cliff rose about 100 feet above the main trail, accessible by a secondary path that seemed much more dangerous than the one we were following. The rocks were loose. There were fewer trees to grab onto in case of a slip, and from the top you could see a precipice that fell into a deep ravine full of sharp rocks. "I don't know if it's a good idea," I said, trying to sound casual. "That path seems quite dangerous for people our age." But Rachel had already begun to walk toward the fork, carrying her backpack full of safety equipment that I knew she wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Margaret. she said with that persuasive voice she used when she wanted to convince me of something. It will only take a few minutes. Besides, Nathan is right. The photos from up there will be spectacular. The way she said spectacular made me tremble. They would be spectacular for whoever saw them afterward, as evidence of our accident. William squeezed my hand discreetly, reminding me that his phone was recording everything. We had to continue. We had to go all the way to get the evidence we needed. If we refused now, they would simply find another opportunity, another place, another excuse to kill us. The climb to the cliff was exhausting. The loose rocks slid beneath our feet, and more than once I almost fell. But the most terrifying thing was realizing how perfect this place was for a murder. If someone accidentally tripped and fell from the top, there would be no way to survive. And most importantly, there would be no witnesses. We're almost there, shouted Rachel from above, where she had already arrived with the agility of someone who had carefully planned this route. Nathan followed her, and then helped William and me complete the last few meters of the climb. His hands on my arms felt like the claws of a predator. The lookout was, in fact, spectacular. From there we could see the entire valley, the mountains in the distance, and a lake shining on the horizon. Under any other circumstances, it would have been a beautiful moment to share with family. But knowing what I knew, the place felt like the perfect setting for a nightmare. Come here for the photos, shouted Rachel, positioning herself near the edge of the cliff. I want the valley to be in the background. William and I slowly approached, each step bringing us closer to our final destination. I could see Nathan positioning himself strategically behind us, calculating angles, measuring distances. Perfect, exclaimed Rachel, raising her camera. Now hug each other and smile. William and I embraced, probably for the last time, while she took photo after photo. Each flash of the camera felt like lightning announcing the storm that was about to arrive. Take another one, suggested Nathan, moving closer to us. But this time stand a little further back, so the landscape shows better in the frame. One step back meant being exactly at the edge of the precipice. William and I exchanged a glance. The moment had arrived. We moved backward as ordered, feeling the solid ground disappear beneath our feet, with only the emptiness of the abyss behind us. Rachel raised the camera once more, but this time, I saw something different in her eyes. There was no longer any need to pretend. The mask had fallen. Smile, she said, with a voice that was no longer gentle. This is going to be your last photo. At that moment, Nathan lunged toward us with outstretched arms. The plan was simple. Push us backward so we would fall into the void. Take some photos of the accident, and then go down to discover our broken bodies. But William had been preparing for this moment. At the last second, he managed to grab Nathan's wrist and pull him forward. If we're going to die, you're coming with us, he shouted with a fury I had never seen in him before. For a moment, the four of us were wobbling at the edge of the cliff, grabbing onto each other in a macabre dance between life and death. Rachel screamed and tried to help Nathan, but the weight of all of us was too much. I felt the ground give way beneath my feet. I felt gravity beginning to win the battle. And then the four of us fell together, locked in a deadly embrace, screaming as the air whistled around us, and the rocky ground approached at a dizzying speed. In those seconds that lasted an eternity, I thought of Emily, of how she must have felt when Nathan pushed her off the cliff 20 years ago. I imagined her terror, her confusion, her betrayal upon realizing that her own brother had condemned her to death. The impact was brutal. I heard the horrible sound of bones breaking, the sound of my own body being smashed against the rocks. The pain was indescribable, but even more terrible was the taste of blood in my mouth, and the certainty that this time Nathan had won. This time, there would be no witnesses to tell the truth. But then I heard William's voice, weak but clear. Margaret, don't move. Pretend you're dead. And I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense I thought I would go mad. Every fiber of my body screamed in agony. I felt blood trickling down my face, and something hot and sticky soaking my clothes. but William's voice resonated in my ears like a divine command. Pretend you're dead. With a willpower I didn't know I possessed, I remained completely still, controlling even my breathing to make it imperceptible. A few yards away I could hear the groans of pain from Nathan and Rachel. They too had survived the fall, but from the sounds they were making, they seemed to be in worse condition than us. Rachel, I heard my son's broken voice. Are you okay? His concern for his wife turned my stomach. This man who had caused the death of his own sister and tried to kill us was still capable of feeling love for someone. I think I broke my leg, groaned Rachel. It hurts so much, Nathan. What about the old folks? The derogatory way she referred to us confirmed what I already knew. We were never family to her. We were just obstacles in the path to our money. I heard movement, as if Nathan were crawling in our direction. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid he might hear it. They're dead, he announced after a few minutes that seemed like hours. Both have their eyes open, but they're not breathing. His lie filled me with a strange hope. If he believed we were dead, perhaps we would have a chance. Perfect, whispered Rachel with a satisfaction that chilled my blood. It worked exactly as we planned. Well, except for the part where we fell too, Nathan responded with a bitter laugh. At least now we won't have to pretend we love them anymore. In the following minutes, which seemed like an eternity, Nathan and Rachel discussed their situation. Both were injured but could move. The plan now was to crawl until they found a place from where they could call for help, and then tell the story of how they had miraculously survived a tragic accident that had killed their poor parents. Remember the story, Nathan told Rachel. We were taking photos when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped and, trying to grab onto something, pulled Mom with him. We tried to help, but we fell too. It's important that our stories match. I know, Rachel replied. We practiced it 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us. We lost our dear parents in a horrible accident. Their performance was so convincing that if I hadn't lived through the truth, I would have believed every word. Gradually, their voices faded, as they crawled toward what they hoped would be salvation. When silence finally fell, William whispered my name, so softly, I could barely hear it. Margaret, are you all right? Yes, I responded in the same whisper, confirming that I was alive, but terribly injured. And you? My right leg is broken, he told me with a voice suffocated by pain. And I think I have some fractured ribs. What about you? I did a mental inventory of my body. I felt a sharp pain in my left arm. My head was throbbing, as if someone were hitting it with a hammer. And there was definitely something wrong with my shoulder. But I was alive, and that was more than I had expected. We're in bad shape, but we're alive, I whispered. The phone is recording, but there's no signal down here. That was the most terrifying part of our situation. We were alive, but trapped at the bottom of a ravine, injured and with no way to communicate with the outside world. If no one came looking for us, we would slowly die there from thirst, hunger, or our injuries. William, I whispered, before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that really happened the night Emily died. My husband sighed deeply, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. That night, he began with a trembling voice, Emily came to find me in the workshop. She was furious. She had papers in her hands, bank statements. She showed me evidence that Nathan had been stealing money from our accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Emily had been investigating because she had noticed discrepancies in our savings. The physical pain mingled with the emotional pain as I listened to the truth that had been hidden for decades. Emily wanted to confront Nathan that same night, William continued. I tried to calm her, to convince her to wait until the next day, but she was determined. She said she couldn't sleep knowing her younger brother was stealing from us. And you followed her? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I followed her because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew Emily's temper when she was angry, and I had also noticed something strange about Nathan lately, a coldness that gave me chills. When I reached Widow's Peak, William continued, I found them shouting at each other. Emily had the papers in her hand, waving them in Nathan's face. You're a thief, she was shouting. You're stealing from our own parents. Nathan was denying everything. He said Emily was crazy, that she was making things up. My heart raced as I imagined the scene. My two children confronting each other in the darkness, one accusing the other of betrayal. What happened next? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. William paused for a long time before continuing. Emily told him that if he didn't return the money and confess everything to us, she would tell us the truth herself. Nathan became furious. He shouted that Emily had always been the favorite, that she had always had everything easy, that it was time for things to change. And then, William's voice broke. Nathan pushed Emily. It wasn't an accident. He pushed her with all his strength, deliberately. Tears ran down my face, mixing with the blood from my wounds. Why did you never tell me the truth? I asked, feeling a mixture of rage and desperation. William sighed deeply. Because when I reached where Nathan was, he was crying, shaking, telling me over and over that it had been an accident, that he hadn't meant to do it. He begged me not to tell you anything, that he couldn't lose you too. But you knew it was a lie, I murmured, feeling the weight of betrayal deepen. Yes, but he was my son, Margaret, my only surviving child. How could I turn him in to the police? How could I destroy what was left of our family? His justification hurt, as much as my physical injuries. And the stolen money? I continued. Nathan promised he would return it, little by little. He swore it had been a bad decision, that he was desperate, that it would never happen again. But he never returned a single penny. In fact, he continued stealing, and I continued in silence, because each day that passed made me more complicit in his crime. At that moment, we heard voices in the distance. Nathan and Rachel had managed to find help. Soon, the rescue teams would be here, and our murderous children would play the roles of their lives, the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. The voices grew closer, accompanied by the sound of helicopters flying over the area. The rescue team had arrived, and with them came the most crucial moment of our lives. William and I had to make a decision in a matter of minutes. Should we continue pretending to be dead until we found the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth, or risk being rescued along with our assassins? Margaret, William whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything that happened up there. We have Rachel's confession about the plan. We have Nathan admitting we're obstacles. We have it all. But if they find us alive now, they can destroy the evidence before we manage to hand it over to the authorities. He was right. If Nathan and Rachel realized we had survived and heard their confessions, they would find a way to silence us forever. This time it wouldn't be an accident. It would be something much more direct and definitive. We had to wait for the perfect moment. They're down here, shouted Rachel's voice from above. My in-laws, please hurry. Her performance was perfect. Her voice broken with pain and desperation. If I didn't know the truth, I would have believed she was a daughter-in-law, devastated by the loss of her in-laws. Ma'am, stay calm, responded an authoritative voice that must have belonged to the rescue team leader. We're going to go down to evaluate them. Can you and your husband move? I heard the sound of ropes and equipment being prepared for the descent. Nathan had perfected his role as the grieving son. I can't believe this happened, he sobbed. We were taking pictures. So happy. Everything happened so fast. A rock came loose, and they fell. Every word was a stab in my heart, because I knew he would repeat those same lies to the police, to the media, to anyone who wanted to hear his version of the events. The rescuers began to descend. I could hear their voices approaching, the sound of boots against rock, the jingling of equipment. William discreetly squeezed my hand, reminding me that we had to maintain the act no matter what happened. They're here, shouted one of the rescuers upon finding us. We have 2 people at the bottom of the ravine. He approached us and began to examine us. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing so shallow it was almost imperceptible. I felt his hands searching for a pulse in my neck. his ear close to my mouth, trying to detect breathing. "This one still has a weak pulse," he announced, referring to William. "The woman, I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately." My heart raced. The plan was working. They would believe William was on the verge of death, but still alive, while I would be close enough to death not to be an immediate threat. In the following minutes, which seemed like hours, the paramedics worked on us. I felt them put an oxygen mask on me, check my wounds, and secure me to a stretcher. The whole time I had to fight against every instinct in my body that screamed at me to open my eyes, to ask for help, to stop pretending. "The man is stable, but in critical condition," I heard one of the paramedics report on the radio. "The woman is in very serious condition, pulse almost imperceptible. We need to transport them to the hospital immediately." Perfect. They would take us to the hospital, where we would have the opportunity to speak with the authorities without Nathan and Rachel being able to silence us. During the ascent, on the stretchers, I could hear Rachel's sobs and the words of comfort that the rescuers offered her, and Nathan. "You were very brave to survive this," someone told them. "It's a miracle you're relatively well." If they only knew that the real miracle was that William and I were alive to tell the truth. In the medical helicopter, as we flew toward the hospital, I could sense William's presence on the stretcher beside me. The paramedics were focused on keeping him stable, and from their conversations I understood that he was in critical condition. His injuries were more serious than mine, and for a terrible moment, I feared he might die before we had the chance to reveal the truth. "Ma'am," I heard one of the paramedics say to me, "if you can hear me, hang on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes." His voice was kind, full of a genuine compassion that contrasted dramatically with the falseness I had been hearing from my own family. When we arrived at the hospital in Boston, the chaos was immediate. Doctors and nurses ran from one side to the other, shouting medical orders. I didn't understand. I was taken directly to an emergency room, where they began to work on my injuries. I had to continue pretending I was unconscious, but I also needed to find a way to communicate with someone I could trust. "Doctor," I heard a nurse say, "her vital signs are strange. The pulse is stronger than we would expect for someone in her supposed condition." My heart skipped a beat. I had been discovered. I was such a bad actress that my own body was betraying me. "It happens sometimes in cases of extreme trauma," the doctor responded. "The body has mysterious ways of clinging to life. Let's maintain strict monitoring. The next few hours will be crucial." Nathan made a sound that was supposedly a sob of pain, but to me it sounded like a sigh of relief. "Can we see them?" asked Rachel. "Just for a few minutes. We need to say goodbye in case something happens." The doctor nodded, and soon I heard footsteps approaching my bed. It was the most dangerous moment of all. I had to convince my assassins that I was really dying. I felt Nathan's presence next to my bed. His hand touched mine, and all I could do was not immediately withdraw my hand. "Mom," he whispered, "if you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I'm so sorry this happened." His words were poisoned, honey, sweet on the surface, but deadly in their essence. Rachel approached from the other side. "Margaret dear," she murmured, "you've been like a mother to me. We'll never forget you." Lie. The only reason they wouldn't forget me was because they would have to live with the knowledge that they had murdered me. But then Nathan leaned closer to my ear and whispered something that chilled my blood. "I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom. You should never have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried." Just like Emily. At that moment I knew our plan had worked. Nathan had just confessed, and although I had no way to record it, there was a nurse in the room who had heard every word. Nathan's whisper resonated in my ears like a direct confession of his guilt. He had mentioned Emily, he had admitted that some truths should remain buried, and most importantly, he had acknowledged that our questions about finances had been the reason for our accident. But I needed more than that. I needed a complete confession that couldn't be misinterpreted or denied later. The nurse who had heard the comment, a young woman named Jennifer according to her identification, had stopped checking the monitors. Through my half-closed eyelids, I saw her eyes widen in surprise and horror. She had heard something she shouldn't have heard, and her expression told me she understood the implications of those words perfectly. "What did you say about Emily?" whispered Rachel, obviously surprised by the mention of the dead sister. Nathan tensed, realizing he had said too much. "Nothing," he murmured. "I just meant, well, Mom always wondered what really happened that night." "I don't think it matters now," Rachel responded, but her voice was loaded with tension. It did matter, and Rachel was smart enough to realize her husband had made a mistake. "Let's go," Nathan told her with a tense voice. "The doctors need space to work." I could feel the tension between them, the mutual understanding that they had spoken too much in the wrong place. After they left, Nurse Jennifer approached my bed. "Ma'am," she whispered so softly, I could barely hear her. "I know you can hear me. What I just heard isn't normal. If you're in danger, you need to let me know somehow." Her voice had an urgency that filled me with hope. Someone else had begun to suspect. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, I moved my index finger. It was the smallest possible movement. But Jennifer noticed it immediately. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're pretending to be unconscious." I moved my finger again, this time twice. "Listen," she said, leaning even closer. "I'm going to pretend I'm checking your monitors. If you're in danger because of those people who just left, move your finger 3 times." Without hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times. Jennifer gasped. "Did they do this to you?" 3 more movements. The nurse moved away from my bed and pretended to check my IV while she processed what she had just discovered. I could see in her expression that she was grappling with the decision of what to do. Finally, she approached me again. "I'm going to talk to the doctor in charge," she whispered. "But I need you to keep pretending until we can protect you, understand?" I moved my finger once. The next few minutes were agonizing. Jennifer left the room, and I was left alone, waiting and praying that she would believe my story and take the right actions. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Jennifer accompanied by an older woman, who must have been the chief doctor, and surprisingly, 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said in a low voice. "Nurse Jennifer told me about your situation. If you can hear me, we need you to know that you're safe now. The police are here to protect you." A wave of relief, so intense it almost broke my act, washed over me. "Can you open your eyes?" asked one of the police officers. Slowly, very slowly, I opened my eyes. The hospital light blinded me for a moment, but gradually I could focus on the concerned faces surrounding me. "Thank God," murmured Jennifer. "I thought I was going crazy." "Ma'am," said the police officer, a middle-aged man with a serious expression. "I'm Detective Collins. We understand you may be in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper, after hours of pretending to be unconscious. My son and his wife pushed us. They tried to kill us." The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, recordings, and revelations. I told Detective Collins everything I knew. Emily's death, Nathan's thefts, the pressure to change our will, and finally the plan to murder us on the mountain. But the most important thing was the recording on William's phone. "Your husband has recorded evidence?" asked the detective, his eyes brightening. "Yes," I responded. "Everything is on his phone, the confessions, the plans, everything." The detective immediately went to the room where William was being treated. William had regained consciousness shortly after me, and when the detective explained the situation, he handed over his phone without hesitation. "Here's everything," he said with a weak but firm voice. 20 years of lies and the truth about what happened today. While the police technicians analyzed the recording, Nathan and Rachel remained in the waiting room, playing their roles as devastated family members for other hospital visitors. They had no idea that their careful performance was about to end forever. "The recording is clear," announced the detective after an hour. "We have explicit confessions about Emily's murder, admissions about stealing money, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder against you both. It's more than enough to arrest them." "But are you going to arrest them here?" I asked, concerned for our safety. "If they realize we're alive and talking." The detective nodded, understanding my concern. "We already have officers in position. As soon as we have the arrest warrant signed, we'll detain them. Meanwhile, you two are under police protection." The irony of the situation didn't escape me. Nathan and Rachel were down there, probably talking with relatives of other patients, receiving condolences for our deaths, planning how to deal with our funeral and inheritance. They had no idea that in the rooms upstairs, we were dismantling their carefully constructed world of lies. "Is there anything else?" I asked, feeling that something still bothered me. The detective took a folder of papers. "After hearing your story, we preliminarily investigated your son's finances. He's not only bankrupt as you suspected, but he also owes money to some very dangerous people, loan sharks who don't accept excuses." My blood froze. "You mean we weren't just inconveniences for him?" "You and your husband were his only salvation," he confirmed. "With your inheritance, he could pay his debts and start over. Without you, he would probably be dead within weeks." That revelation added a new dimension to the betrayal. He didn't just see us as obstacles, he saw us as his financial salvation. Our death wasn't just convenient for him, it was absolutely necessary for his survival. "And what will happen to our grandchildren?" I asked, feeling a new wave of pain, thinking about Nathan and Rachel's innocent children. "Social services will take temporary custody," the detective responded kindly. "But from what I understand, you could apply for guardianship as soon as you recover from your injuries." The idea of raising the children of our own assassins was overwhelming, but it was also the only way to ensure that something good would come from this nightmare. Those children were innocent and deserved a chance to grow up in a home where love was real, not pretended. "It's time," announced the detective, when an officer entered the room with papers in his hands. "The orders are signed. We're going to arrest them now." Through the window of my room that looked out onto the hospital lobby, I could see the police officers positioning themselves discreetly. The moment I had been waiting for 20 years had finally arrived. "Nathan Reynolds and Rachel Reynolds," I heard the detective's firm voice. "You're under arrest for the murder of Emily Reynolds and for the attempted murder of Margaret and William Reynolds." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Rachel's hysterical voice. "What are you talking about? We're the victims here. Our parents died in an accident." "Ma'am," the officer responded calmly, "your in-laws are alive and have provided complete evidence of your crimes." There was a moment of absolute silence followed by a cry of desperation from Nathan. "That's impossible. We saw them die, they were dead." His involuntary confession was captured by the police recorders, adding another piece of evidence to the case. On the radio, I heard Rachel begin to blame Nathan. "It was all his idea. I didn't want to do any of this. He forced me." And Nathan, in his desperation, shouted, "You were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned all this from the beginning." In a matter of minutes, the alliance that had lasted years crumbled as each tried to save their own skin. Detective Collins returned to my room, an hour later with an expression of satisfaction mixed with sadness. "They're detained and on their way to the police station," he reported. "Both are trying to blame each other, which only strengthens our case. But there's something else I need to tell you." "What else?" I asked, though I wasn't sure if my heart could handle more revelations. "During the arrest, we found this in your daughter-in-law's purse," he said, showing me a small digital recorder. "Apparently she had been recording conversations with you and your husband in recent weeks, probably looking for evidence that you suspected something." My blood froze. "What does that mean?" The detective sighed. "It means they knew you were beginning to discover the truth. The trip to the mountains wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a direct response to your suspicions. In one of the recordings, you can clearly hear Rachel telling Nathan, 'We need to act quickly before they go to the police.' The depth of the planning and the coldness of the calculation left me breathless. They hadn't just planned to kill us, they had been monitoring our conversations, assessing the level of danger we represented to them. We were mice in a maze, and they had been the scientists observing our every move. There's one more thing, the detective continued, that we found in the investigation of your finances. Your son wasn't just in debt to dangerous loan sharks, he had also forged your signature on various documents, trying to access your bank accounts. If you had died in that ravine, he would have had immediate access to all your resources. Each new revelation was like another stab wound. My own son had not only planned to murder me, he had been actively stealing from me, forging my signature, and violating every principle of family trust I had tried to instill in him. How much money did he steal in total? I asked, though I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. Close to $120,000 over the last 3 years, the detective responded. Small amounts that he thought you wouldn't notice, but which, when added up, total a significant amount. The money that William and I had saved over decades of hard work, penny by penny, had been financing our son's luxury lifestyle while he planned our murder. The following days in the hospital were a whirlwind of interviews with the police, visits from lawyers and calls from media outlets that had caught wind of the story. The local press had titled the case, "The Most Horrific Family Betrayal of the Decade," and reporters from all over the country wanted to hear our version of events. My sister Charlotte arrived from Chicago, crying and hugging me as if she hadn't seen me in decades. "Margaret," she told me several times, "I always knew there was something strange about Nathan after Emily's death, but I never imagined he was capable of this." Her words comforted me, because they confirmed that my maternal instincts hadn't been completely blind. "And the children?" I asked about my grandchildren who were now in the temporary custody of social services. "I visited them yesterday," Charlotte responded sadly. "They're confused, asking why their parents can't come home. They're too young to understand what really happened." The lawyer we hired, Miss Thompson, a competent and compassionate woman, came to see us with news about the legal process. "The case is solid," she assured us. "With the recordings, the confessions during the arrest, and all the financial evidence, it's almost impossible for them to escape significant convictions." But then she added something that chilled me to the bone. "However, they're trying to negotiate a lesser guilty plea, claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditated." "A crime of passion?" I exclaimed indignantly. "They planned this for weeks, bought special equipment, and chose the perfect place." Miss Thompson nodded gravely. "I know, and we have evidence of the premeditation, but their lawyers are going to argue it was a desperate decision taken under extreme financial pressure." The idea that they might receive reduced sentences for their crimes filled me with fury. They had killed Emily, tried to murder us, stolen our money for years, and now wanted to present themselves as victims of circumstances. "What can we do to ensure they receive what they deserve?" I asked. "Testify," Miss Thompson responded simply. "Your testimony combined with all the evidence will be crucial for the jury to understand the true nature of these crimes. But I warn you, it will be emotionally devastating to face your son in court." She was right. The idea of looking Nathan in the eyes during the trial, of hearing his lawyers trying to justify the unjustifiable, of publicly reliving every moment of this nightmare, was overwhelming, but it was what I had to do for Emily, for us, and for my grandchildren, who deserved to know the truth about their parents. 3 weeks after the arrest, William and I were finally able to go home. Our wounds had healed enough to allow us to move, though he still needed crutches, and I had my arm in a sling. The house felt strange, as if it were the set of a play after all the actors had left. Everything was exactly as we had left it on the day of our family outing. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The bed was unmade. The flowers that Rachel had brought me that week were still on the living room table, now withered and dead. It was as if time had stopped at the moment our normal lives ended forever. "Do you think we'll be happy again?" I asked William that first night back, as we lay in our familiar bed. He embraced me with his uninjured arm and sighed deeply. "I don't know, Margaret," he said, "but we're alive. We have the truth on our side, and for the first time in 20 years, we don't have to live with secrets." The trial began 6 months later. The day I had to testify, I looked Nathan directly in the eyes for the first time since the arrest. I saw no remorse or pain. I didn't see the son I had raised. I saw a stranger, cold and calculating, who had disguised himself as my son for decades. When I finished my testimony, after recounting every horrible detail of our experience, I addressed him directly from the witness stand. Nathan, I don't know who you are, but you're no longer my son. My son died the night you killed Emily, and what has lived in his place for 20 years is a monster that I, unknowingly, helped create. The jury deliberated for 2 days before finding Nathan guilty of intentional homicide for Emily's death and aggravated attempted homicide for what he did to us. Rachel received the same sentence as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of early parole. Now, a year later, William and I have begun the formal adoption process for our grandchildren. They are beautiful, innocent children who deserve a chance to grow up knowing what true love is, not the manipulative and toxic love they received from their biological parents. Every night when I tuck them in, I tell them stories about Aunt Emily, the aunt they never knew. I tell them about her kindness, her honesty, her dream of becoming a doctor and helping people in need. I tell them how brave she was, and how she tried to protect those she loved, even when it put her in danger. I don't tell them about the betrayal, about the fall, about the impact that took her life. They're too young to bear that burden. Maybe someday when they're older, I'll tell them the whole truth, but for now, I want them to grow up without the weight of their parents' dark legacy. I still wake up at night, sometimes sweating and screaming, reliving the moment of the fall. William has nightmares too. We embrace in the darkness, reminding each other that we're alive, that we survived, that the truth finally came to light. We decided to sell the house. There are too many memories there, both good and horrible. We bought a smaller house near the sea, in Cape Cod, where the constant sound of the waves helps us sleep better. A new house for a new beginning. The scar on my shoulder still hurts when the weather changes. William's knee never fully recovered. These are the physical scars we carry. The emotional ones are much deeper. Sometimes I find myself looking at old family photos. Nathan smiling on his 10th birthday. Emily teaching him how to ride a bike. The 4 of us together at a picnic on the beach. I try to understand how something so beautiful could transform into something so monstrous. How did I not see the signs, the small moments that could have alerted me to what was coming? But then I remind myself that love can make us blind. That sometimes we don't want to see the truth because it hurts too much. That we trust those we love, even when we should question them. I never visited Nathan in prison. I can't bring myself to look into the eyes of the person who killed my daughter and tried to kill me. William went once, but he returned more silent than ever. He said only that Nathan showed no remorse, only rage at having been caught. Rachel wrote letters asking for forgiveness, saying she was under Nathan's influence, that she wasn't herself. We didn't respond. Some betrayals are too great to be forgiven. The years will pass, our grandchildren will grow, the pain may diminish a little, but the truth will remain. The truth about how greed can corrupt even the most sacred family bonds, about how silence can protect monsters, about how sometimes we need to pretend to be dead to finally live in the truth. Sometimes, when I walk on the beach with William by my side and our grandchildren running ahead, I feel an unexpected peace. It's not the happiness we knew before. It's something different, something deeper. A feeling that we survived the worst, that life could throw at us, and still found reasons to smile. And somewhere, perhaps Emily is watching all of this, seeing that her death was not in vain, that the truth, even after 20 years, finally came to light, that those who loved her survived to tell her story, and that, in the final accounting, is a form of justice. Every story carries within it an echo of our shared humanity. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone special. Leave us a comment about what you felt, and subscribe to join us for more soul-reaching stories. Because every life tells a story that deserves to be heard. See you next time.